guys, it's Reagan and welcome to a very special seasonal recommendations video. I am going to be talking about today the books I would recommend to read this summer, a summer reading recommendations video, if you will. Now, if you've come to this video curious about the best contemporaries to pack with you on your next adventure, you've clicked on the wrong video today, because I'm going to be talking about my personal favorite books to read during the summer, which generally fall into the category of still fantasy, but just a different type. But anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the video. Now, before I make a complete liar out of myself, I do have one contemporary literary fiction novel to talk about, and that is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. I honestly think either of her two novels, this or Everything I Never Told You, would be perfect summer reads. One, they're both only about 300 pages, they're incredibly fast reads, and both have a central premise of this sort of family drama in suburban America with some sort of thriller-esque drama like fueling behind what's going on. There's this deep-seated mystery and unease that she makes you feel while also just going through people's everyday lives. Little Fires Everywhere is an exceptional novel that is being turned into a upcoming television show, which I'm sure will be very popular, starring Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington. This is a story set in the 90s in a town called Shaker Heights in Ohio. This town is artsy and liberal, but it still has a very strict, undefined and defined rule book. This town is structured, and how people kind of move throughout the town is very, let's just say, organized. And one of our main characters, Elena Richardson, really personifies this sort of feeling within this town. She has a beautiful home, a beautiful family. Both her and her husband have important jobs within the community. She lives a very picturesque white picket fence life. However, her life's kind of turned upside down when an artist moves in, Mia Warren, and Elena rents out her rental property to Mia and her daughter. Then Mia and her daughter kind of begin to integrate with their family, and things kind of begin to spiral a bit out of control. This story opens with Elena Richardson's family home 100% on fire and burning to the ground, and then we flash back to a year earlier where Mia and her daughter move in, and they're kind of trying to piece together what happened within that year to cause such a dramatic aftermath. This book is great. It's full of really complex characters. No one is black and white, good and evil. Everyone is full of gray morality, in that people are just trying to live their life, learning possibly from making bad decisions, but that's what makes them so inexplicably human. People making choices, learning from those choices, good or bad, and you kind of love everyone, but you also hope for people to just be better in the future. Anyway, this book I feel like is so good. I feel like Celeste Ng does such an incredible job writing kind of suburban dramas. She really kind of peeks behind the curtain and you just feel like you're really in the family. I also feel like she created a great 90s setting that really transports you to suburban America in the 90s. As someone who kind of experienced that also in the early 2000s, I can attest to that feeling quite accurate. I also lived in Ohio in the 90s in suburbia, so you know, there's that. The next book I'm gonna recommend falls into the category of angsty YA. There's something about summertime that makes me just want to read easy, breezy, really fun, really entertaining books, and for me that sometimes means kind of an angsty YA paranormal fantasy that will just like put a smile on my face and be super entertaining. Something that perfectly falls into that category is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmer. This is actually a Beauty and the Beast retelling, which at first hearing that I thought, not gonna be for me, that's too cliche. I honestly felt like this book did some really interesting things to those tropes, and ultimately the author crafted a super entertaining, full of twists and turns story. Our main character Harper, who lives in our world, and she has cerebral palsy. Harper and her brother live a rough life. Her father has skipped town after owing a lot of money to some bad people, and their mother is very, very sick. So Harper and her brother work tirelessly day in, day out to raise enough money to survive and also make sure their mother is comfortable as her illness continues to progress. At the beginning of the story, due to some interesting circumstances, Harper is transported to a parallel fantastical world where she meets Prince Ren, who is, as you guessed it, the beast in this story. He's cursed, his kingdom's cursed, she feels pity for his plight, they have a dramatic course of plot intertwines, and so we have this story of really entertaining twists and turns, some really cute romance, but I honestly really loved Harper as a main character. She was spunky and really, really fun. I also feel like the author author is very aware of the trope she's writing about. She makes nods to them. She kind of almost makes us part of the joke. Like, she's like, yeah, I'm aware that this is a little ridiculous, so I'm gonna make a joke out of it, and it kind of breaks the tension. I constantly had a smile on my face throughout this story in a good way. It's funny, it's entertaining. I really enjoyed every second of it. I flew through it. It's a huge page turner, and I can't wait for the sequel to come out, I think this fall. Next, I have a fantasy series that is just one of my all-time faves, and I honestly think it's a perfect series to marathon throughout these summer months. It's very entertaining, a great introduction into adult fantasy, and that is Darker Shades of Magic trilogy by V.E. Schwab. This is an adult fantasy story where we follow a multitude of different POVs, but it's a magical good time that is just incredible and one of my favorite things I have ever read. But specifically, we follow one of our main characters, Kel, who is a traveler. Basically, there are 4 different parallel Londons. There's Grey London, which is our world, which has no magic. There's Red London, which is thriving and full of magic, and this is Kel's hometown. There's White London, which kind of like devours its own magic. It's like spiraling into chaos and like power rules there. And then there's Black London, which has been completely sealed off, no one can go to anymore, and it's like a very evil, dark place that has been defeated. Because of Kel's strange ability to pass through all of these different Londons, he is a messenger and kind of like the main and only diplomat for all of these worlds. He basically passes messages on from various ruling bodies from each one of these Londons, keeping the peace, making sure everything is running smoothly. Something, however, occurs naturally that kind of sets this plot in motion, and one of those things is that he runs into a character called Delilah Bard, who is a girl pickpocket in Grey London, and this changes his life forever. This is a magical story full of hijinks and good time. Kel and Delilah Bard will steal your heart. There's also an amazing sibling moment. There's complicated, great characters. It is a magical story that will just propel you with a smile on your face the whole time. The second book almost has this like Goblet of Fire magical competition element to it. I loved this trilogy so much. It's so good. And I think just, again, a perfect introduction to adult high fantasy and something that will be super easy to read throughout the summer months. It's amazing. You gotta read it. The next book I'm gonna talk about is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. Now, before you're intimidated by this book size, because it is very long, I think a really strong selling point of this book is that it's actually a standalone fantasy novel. So while it's very long, it's basically like you're reading a whole fantasy series in one go. Because it's like, think of it like 300 book pages. It's 900 pages. Actually, I think it's like 800 pages. It's not so bad, guys. Give it a go. This is a really great epic fantasy story that's centering around dragons. This is a story where we follow a multitude of different perspectives residing in different kingdoms, but specifically mostly like the West and the East. 1,000 years ago, there was basically this huge battle, good against evil, and it was essentially the origin to many religions that exist within this world. And from this event, different nations that exist in this fantasy world have interpreted the events in different ways, resulting in very different religions, which have basically made these geographical lands over time distrust and hate each other. So it's kind of like East versus West, but they have a lot of similarities and they have ties that go back thousands of years. At the beginning of the story, that evil that was defeated all those years ago is beginning to rise again, and an unlikely cast of characters kind of have to work together, or not, to figure out how to save the world. This does involve dragons, and again has just a slew of very interesting POVs. We follow an alchemist, we follow a dragon rider in training, we follow a spy, a queen, a pauper. Like, anyone you can think of is present in this story, which makes it so fascinating because you're seeing things unfurl from so many different levels within this world. I also think a huge strength of this novel is that lore and also the geological differences between these two places. You really feel a huge expansiveness to the story, really seeing a lot of history and political tension kind of unfurl before our eyes. I thought this was a really strong novel, and I think is a really good, again, another introductory to epic high fantasy. It is a standalone, which is incredibly rare, but it really has all of the trappings of a fantastical fantasy book. So this is something I would also recommend picking up this summer. Before I move on to my last two books, I have to just mention that if you have not yet read The Way of Kings or The Name of the Wind, ignore all these recommendations and just read these books instead. I promise they're amazing. They're not intimidating to read. They might be long, but they're incredible and you'll fly through them and it'll change your life forever. So read these if you haven't. All right. Continue. Next book recommendation I have is A Winter's Promise by Christelle Dabos. This is the part of the Mirror Visitor Quartet. I want to say, and this has just been an utter surprise for me and something that I just can't stop talking about. This series has swept me off my feet, has a smile on my face the whole time. It's one of the most unique YA stories I've come across in years, and I just feel like everyone needs to read it. In this story, we follow our main character Ophelia, and in her world there was a dramatic catastrophe that kind of led to the end of the world, and from these ashes a new structure of nations arose, meaning like literally arose, because now people live on spires in the sky, and each spire has their own ruling like family spirit, which is very much inspired by a variety of different religious lore from like our world. Think like Artemis, etc., etc. Our main character Ophelia has a very unique set of powers. She can basically do two things. She can touch objects and see their entire past and history of the object itself, and also everyone who touched the object. And two, she can travel through mirrors. Ophelia just wants to live a very ordinary and unremarkable life. However, her family is a little fed up because she refuses to marry. In consequence of this, they basically make a deal to marry her off to a very far away spire, to a man they've never met before, and in the beginning of this book she's basically sent away to this new place. This new spire starkly contrasts her home one. This new spire is absolutely ruthless, and the magic that exists here centered around illusion, so you can imagine how that impacts a day-to-day life within this spire. Also, the family spirit is very detached but demanding, which creates another complicated layer to the political system. Again, this is just truly one of the most unique stories I've come across in a long time from every angle. The romance is unlike anything I've encountered in YA, if you can call it romance. The politics and the world are so unique and captivating, and they're just inspired by so many different elements of like our world. New spire she traveled to kind of gives you like Versailles politics mixed with like Russian Tsar politics. It's wild, and again, incredible. And the writing style is absolutely beautiful, lyrical, and captivating. I loved every second of this first and second novel. I can't wait for the third one to come out. If you haven't picked this up, you gotta read it. It's mesmerizing, the world building is intricate. It is just, it'll blow you away. And the last book I'm going to talk about is highly entertaining and just full throttle the whole time, and that is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This is his YA science fiction story that I just found to be captivating from page one. It is full of high-flying adventure, flight school, and just all of the goodness that comes with that. This is a story that's set on a planet that's constantly under attack. There's a alien species in the sky that's constantly like bombarding their settlements. Because of this, all of their settlements are actually underground, and like being a pilot and like protecting the colony from these invasions, the ultimate position of like power, but also like you're lauded by society at large. We follow our main character Spensa, who dreams of being a pilot. This is what she's wanted to be her whole life. However, while she has big plans for herself of being a pilot, everyone else where she lives does not want her to be so, because her father, a very famous pilot, actually abandoned her post, resulting in some casualties, and has been since deemed a coward. However, at the beginning of the story, Spensa finds something very mysterious in a cave on the planet, which basically prevents them from turning her away to like fulfill her dream. I absolutely loved this story so much from page one to the very last page. Again, it was a high-flying adventure, so much incredible combat. Brandon Sanderson wrote a really intricate story full of twists and turns that I absolutely loved, but I also just felt like this colony was fascinating to read about as well. This is a place where like courage and bravery are put on a pedestal to such an extreme. Any type of cowardice that is shown or hesitation basically puts a target on your back to be ostracized so quickly that people are fearful of even not looking game to do anything, even if it's absolutely the wrong course of action. Beyond that, I just loved all the pilot mechanics, all of the characters in this book. Spensa is a great main character, but there's obviously a lot of side characters as well she meets in pilot school. Yes, I loved every second of this book. I would highly recommend picking it up if you haven't already. The second one comes out this fall. It's so good. Alrighty guys, those are my summer reading recommendations. Let me know down below some books you think I should read or anyone else should read this summer, as I would love to know, and I'll see you guys soon with another video soon. Goodbye.